Welcome to your deep dive on empathy and narcissism. It looks like you've been exploring the nuances of human connection. Fascinating stuff. We've got excerpts from this book on the Law of Narcissism, and it looks at like how self-absorption can really impact our relationships and what it takes to develop genuine empathy.
Absolutely. And I think what's so fascinating about this book is this concept of the narcissistic spectrum and how we can all actually shift along that.
Okay, so where does this book say narcissism starts?
Well, it actually argues that all humans are narcissistic to some degree.
Really, to some degree.
Yeah. It emphasizes that the need for attention and validation is really just a fundamental human drive.
I mean, I can see that.
Yeah.
We all want to feel important, I guess.
Right, exactly. And the book even makes this point about how the need for eye contact runs so deep that people in isolation begin to doubt their own existence.
Wow, okay, that's a little creepy. I mean, I can see that, like, we all crave connection, but is the book saying we're all narcissists?
Well, that's where this idea of the narcissistic spectrum comes in. It's not black and white. The book breaks it down into two main categories. You have deep narcissists and functional narcissists.
Okay, so deep narcissists and functional narcissists.
Right.
Like a scale.
Exactly. It's a spectrum. And most of us, thankfully, fall into that functional category.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
So how does the spectrum work? The book mentions a thermostat analogy.
Right. So the book uses this analogy of a thermostat to explain healthy self-esteem. So imagine healthy self-esteem is like a well-functioning thermostat. It helps us regulate our insecurities and then allows us to direct our attention outward.
So someone with good self-esteem can acknowledge their needs, but also genuinely care about other people.
Exactly. But with deep narcissists, that thermostat is like broken. They haven't developed a stable sense of self. And a lot of times this is due to early childhood experiences or maybe, some difficult family dynamics that have kind of shaped their development.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then thinking about somebody I know who might fit this deep narcissist type, I'm always like, why are their relationships so unstable? Does the book address that?
It does. And this is really at the heart of it. Deep narcissists struggle with true connection because they see other people as extensions of themselves.
Like they're not really seeing the other person.
Right, as an individual with their own needs and feelings. They're almost like tools,
Right.
to get their own needs met. And the book actually calls these self-objects.
Self-objects. Wow, that's pretty intense.
Yeah, it is. And so it creates this really unhealthy dynamic where the deep narcissist is constantly trying to control, manipulate others just to kind of get what they want. And that ultimately leads to these very volatile, short-lived relationships that you were just talking about.
Right. So then that also explains this whole thing about narcissistic rage, right? Like if their ego is threatened at all, it's like, boom.
Yes. Their self-esteem is incredibly fragile. So any perceived threat, any threat to their sense of superiority can trigger this huge explosive reaction.
Yeah, like they just can't handle any criticism.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever encountered someone who just can't handle even constructive criticism?
Oh, yeah.
It's like
Okay.
they need this constant praise, this constant validation.
Yeah. Well, then that seems kind of contradictory, right? Because the book also says that deep narcissists can be attracted to leadership roles.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so interesting, this paradox.
Yeah.
So, that charisma and ambition, it definitely can propel them into positions of power.
Right.
But the problem is they often lack the ability to build these stable structures and to manage their own insecurities. And so ultimately that leads to their downfall.
They might rise pretty quick, but then they crash and burn just as fast.
That's kind of the pattern that the book highlights.
Yeah.
It even gives this example of Joseph Stalin. Initially, he was quite charming, and he managed to, really climb the ranks. But as we know, he became a paranoid tyrant who, ultimately destroyed those around him.
Right. That's kind of a scary thought, though, right? That, like, this unchecked narcissism could, like, completely corrupt someone.
It really is.
It makes you wonder, like, how do we spot those early signs, especially in people who are, seeking power?
It's a crucial question. And I think, Understanding that deep narcissist type really helps us to recognize those red flags. But thankfully, the book's main focus is really on functional narcissists. That's where most of us fall on that spectrum, and that's really where we have the power to make real changes.
Okay, good. So tell me more about this functional narcissist. How are they different?
Well, unlike deep narcissists, functional narcissists have developed a more solid sense of self. Remember that thermostat analogy?
Yeah.
They have a better grasp of their own needs, and they can regulate their emotions, more effectively. And they can actually focus their energy on, their work, on building relationships, on personal growth.
But they're not constantly seeking that external validation.
Right. But here's the catch. They're still prone to some self-absorption, some biases, and this can sometimes get in the way of truly, understanding and empathizing with others.
Okay. So there's still room for growth, even for those of us who aren't like full-blown deep narcissists.
Exactly.
That makes me think about like the book's whole point. It's not just about like diagnosing narcissism. It's actually about developing empathy, right?
Exactly. And it emphasizes that acknowledging our own tendencies toward narcissism is the first step in actually transforming them. It's about taking responsibility for our actions and becoming more aware of how our behavior impacts others.
Yeah, that self-awareness piece is so crucial. Okay, so how do we actually develop empathy? The book talks about 4 key components, right?
It does. It outlines empathetic attitude, visceral empathy, analytic empathy, and empathetic skill. And each of these components, they build on each other to create this framework for understanding and connecting with people on a much deeper level.
Okay, I like that. Let's break it down. Let's start with this empathetic attitude. What does that involve?
Essentially, it's about approaching others with this genuine, curiosity. Think of yourself as like a detective,
Okay.
trying to understand their unique story. So it's about resisting those, those snap judgments we all make. It's about listening, truly listening to understand, not just to respond.
Yeah. Instead of think, okay, what am I going to say next? It's like really be present and absorb what they're saying.
Exactly. It's about shifting our focus from ourselves to the other person. And the book gives some great techniques for actually doing that. One is to actually practice mirroring back what the person is saying, both their words and their body language.
Oh, interesting. So it's like holding up a mirror to their experience and showing them that you're really listening and trying to understand.
Precisely. It validates their feelings, and it creates this sense of, connection and shared understanding.
Okay, so I can see how that would help build empathy. But what about those times when we encounter someone who's like really different from us, someone whose values and experiences are like totally foreign to our own? How do we develop empathy in those situations?
That's where this thing called visceral empathy comes in. And this is all about tuning into the emotional states of others, even if their words don't quite match up,
So going beyond just the words.
Exactly.
Like if somebody's saying, oh, I'm fine, but their body language is screaming stress.
Exactly. It's about tuning into what the book calls feeling tone of the interaction, that kind of emotional undercurrent beneath the words. And so the book suggests paying close attention to specific things like, body language, tone of voice, facial expressions, all those little things that can kind of give us clues about what someone's really feeling.
So it's almost like becoming an emotional detective.
Yeah.
And you're like piecing together the clues.
Exactly.
But sometimes those cues are like really subtle, right?
Well, yeah.
It's hard to read. Like, how do we get better at recognizing those things?
It takes practice. Just like learning any new skill, the more we observe and interact with people, the more attuned we become to those subtle signals. And the book also encourages us to pay attention to our own physical reactions.
What do you mean by our own physical reaction?
So, our bodies are often much wiser than our minds, and they can actually react unconsciously to other people's emotions. So, for example, if someone's anxious, we might feel a tightness in our chest, even if we don't like consciously register their anxiety.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's not just about like observing the other person. It's also about like paying attention to what's happening within ourselves.
Exactly.
And those like little subtle bodily sensations that might be mirroring their emotional state.
Precisely. By tuning into those sensations, we can actually deepen our understanding of both ourselves and others.
Okay, so we talked about empathetic attitude, visceral empathy. What's next on the list?
The next level is analytic empathy. And this one is all about gathering information and knowledge to get a deeper understanding of someone's perspective.
Okay. So, like, going beyond those initial impressions and really digging deeper into their background.
Exactly. Their values, their experiences. And the book actually has a great way of putting it. It says to approach it like an investigative journalist.
I like that.
So you're digging for clues, you're asking questions, you're trying to piece together this story that helps you understand why this person thinks and acts the way they do.
Okay, so what kind of questions should we be asking? And how do we, like, make sure we're not being too intrusive or disrespectful?
That's a great question. It's about finding that balance between curiosity and sensitivity. You
Yeah.
want to ask questions that help you understand uh, their values
Yeah.
and how those values were shaped by their life experiences.
Okay. So, like, their childhood,
Yeah.
family dynamic.
Exactly. Any major events that might have kind of, influenced their worldview.
Right.
But remember, these can be sensitive topics. So it's crucial to build, trust and rapport first, to create this safe space where the other person feels comfortable opening up.
Right. It's not about barging in and demanding answers. It's about, like, gently inviting them to share their story.
Exactly.
But I imagine some people are more open to that than others.
Of course, of course.
Right.
Not everyone's, comfortable sharing their deepest thoughts and feelings. And that's okay. The key is to be respectful of their boundaries and to approach the conversation with genuine curiosity and compassion.
Okay. So we've got empathetic attitude, visceral empathy, analytic empathy. What's the final piece of the puzzle?
The book concludes with empathetic skill.
Hmm.
And this is all about, putting all these components into practice and really honing our ability to understand others.
Okay. So it's like empathy is a muscle, and we need to exercise it.
Exactly.
It's not just something we're born with or without. It's like a skill we can develop and refine over time.
Exactly. It takes conscious effort. It takes a willingness to challenge our assumptions. And the book gives us some really practical tips for actually doing that. And one of the most important is to actually seek feedback.
Feedback. So, like, we should actually ask people if we're understanding them correctly.
Yes. Talk to trusted friends or family members and ask them for honest feedback on how you're coming across. Are you really listening? Are you accurately understanding their perspective?
Hmm. That takes courage, right? It can be tough to hear, like constructive criticism.
It can be. But if we're serious about, improving our empathy, we have to be open to that feedback, even if it's, uncomfortable. And it's not just about external feedback. It's also about, paying attention to our own internal reactions.
Like, if we're constantly misreading people or getting into conflicts, that's a sign that maybe we need to work on our empathy.
Exactly. Exactly. Those patterns in our relationships can be really, valuable clues. Self-awareness is so crucial for developing any skill, and empathy is no exception.
Yeah. It makes me think about, like, how interconnected we all are. Our ability to understand and connect with others really shapes the world we live in.
Absolutely. And the book really brings those connections to life through some fascinating case studies. It explores how narcissism and empathy play out in, real-world scenarios. And it's pretty eye-opening.
Okay. I'm hooked. Tell me more about these case studies.
So the first case study the book dives into is Jeanne de Belciel. She was a nun who the book considers like a classic, theatrical narcissist.
Oh, a nun with a flair for the dramatic, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, so Jean was famous for these really dramatic displays of a piety, even claiming at one point to be possessed by demons.
Whoa, demons. Okay. So what did people think about all this?
Well, sadly, a lot of people believed her. And she even accused a local priest, Urbain Grenier, of witchcraft. She claimed he was controlling the demons that were tormenting her.
Oh, no. So what happened to him?
Well, because of Jean's claims, he was arrested, tortured, and eventually executed.
That's terrible. So how does all this tie back to narcissism?
Well, the book argues that Jean was incredibly manipulative. She used her, dramatic personality and these supposed spiritual experiences to, like, get attention, to control people.
So it's like she was putting on a performance.
Exactly, yeah. Playing on people's beliefs and fears.
Wow, that's really chilling. It makes you think twice about, like, taking everything at face value, especially when someone's putting on, a big show of emotion.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale about mistaking theatrics for, genuine depth of feeling. And it reminds us that narcissism isn't always, loud and obvious. Sometimes it can be kind of hidden behind this mask of, you know, piety or charisma.
Right. Okay, so we've got Gene, the theatrical narcissist. What other examples does the book dive into?
Well, there's this, the relationship between Leo Tolstoy, the famous author of War and Peace, and his wife Sonia.
Tolstoy, yeah. And that's a household name. But I'm guessing their relationship wasn't exactly a fairy tale.
No, not quite. Their relationship was, full of passion, but also a lot of conflict, and a real lack of empathy on both sides.
Mm.
It seems like they had like fundamentally different values and personalities,
Yeah.
which created this constant source of tension.
So, like, what kind of values are we talking about?
Well, so Tolstoy was deeply spiritual and wanted a simple life. And Sonia, on the other hand, she was more practical,
Huh.
and she enjoyed the comfort that their wealth provided. So they couldn't see eye to eye.
Huh.
And that gap created, a lot of resentment and misunderstanding.
Yeah, it sounds like they were speaking different languages.
That's a great way to put it, emotionally speaking.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't bridge that gap. And the book argues that their lack of empathy really prevented them from truly seeing and understanding each other's perspectives.
It makes you wonder, like, how many relationships out there are struggling with that same issue, where people are just so caught up in, like, their own needs and wants that they can't, step outside themselves and try to see things from their partner's point of view.
It's a common problem, and I think it highlights why developing empathy is so crucial,
Yeah.
especially in our closest relationships. It's not just about avoiding conflict. It's about creating a space where both people feel seen, heard, and understood.
Right. Okay, so Jean de Belial showed us how narcissism can be manipulative, and then the Tolstoys illustrated like how a lack of empathy can really poison a relationship, even one full of love. Does the book give any examples of like empathy done well?
It does. There's this great story about Ernest Shackleton, the Antarctic explorer.
Shackleton, that's a name that conjures up images of like courage and leadership.
Exactly. His leadership during the Endurance expedition is a fantastic example of how empathy can really inspire and motivate people, even when they're, facing incredible hardship.
So tell me a little bit about this expedition. What happened?
Well, in 1914, Shackleton set out to lead, the first land crossing of Antarctica. But their ship, the Endurance, got trapped in pack ice.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and they had to abandon ship.
Yeah.
And they ended up, camping on this ice floe for months. And they were facing, brutal weather, dwindling supplies, and, the constant threat of death.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying. How did they even survive? What did Shackleton do?
Well, he became a master at reading people's moods and emotions. He was
Mhm.
constantly observing his crew, listening to their tone of voice, watching their body language. And he was, looking for any signs of negativity or despair.
So, like, really putting that visceral empathy into practice?
Exactly. He was, tuning into those subtle cues, trying to understand what his crew was going through, not just physically, but emotionally. And then he used that information to, like, adjust his leadership style.
So it wasn't just like a one-size-fits-all approach to leadership.
Right. He knew that each man had, different strengths, different weaknesses, different emotional triggers. And he tailored his interactions accordingly.
So he was really meeting his crew like where they were at emotionally.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
He understood that their survival really depended on maintaining morale and a sense of, unity. He wasn't just their leader. He was like their support system,
Right.
their confidant, their source of strength.
Yeah, it's amazing how he used empathy to create that sense of connection and resilience in like such a dire situation.
It is.
And it makes you realize that like empathy isn't just about, being nice. It's about truly understanding and responding to the needs of others in a way that promotes well-being.
It's a powerful lesson. And it's relevant, far beyond just the frozen wastes of Antarctica. Whether we're, leading a team or raising a family or, simply interacting with our friends and neighbors, that ability to connect on an emotional level is really essential.
These case studies are great. They really make these abstract concepts of narcissism and empathy feel so real and relatable. So we've explored the narcissistic spectrum, we've delved into those four components of empathy, and now we've seen how these ideas play out, like, in real life. So what's the main takeaway?
Well, I think the book, emphasizes this crucial point, which is that while we all have, narcissistic tendencies to some extent, we also have this incredible, capacity for empathy. It's like a muscle.
Yeah.
We can strengthen it and develop it with practice and attention.
So it's not like a fixed trait. We're not just stuck with, whatever level of empathy we're born with. We can actually choose to become more empathetic people.
Exactly. And the book really, challenges us to think about the kind of world we want to live in. Do we want a world driven by, self-interest and competition, or a world where, empathy and understanding are the guiding forces? It's a powerful question. And it makes me realize that cultivating empathy isn't just about, personal growth. It's about contributing to a more compassionate and connected society.
That's such an inspiring message. It really gives me hope that, like, even small acts of empathy can make a difference. But let's be honest, developing empathy isn't always easy. It takes effort. It takes vulnerability. It takes a willingness to, like, step outside our comfort zones.
It does, but the book, provides us with these practical tools and techniques to develop those empathy muscles. And the beauty is, even small steps can have this ripple effect.
Okay. So what are some specific things that we can do starting today to become, more empathetic people?
Well, the book suggests, starting small, focusing on one component of empathy at a time.
Okay.
So, for example, we could practice, active listening and mirroring in our conversations, really trying to understand the other person's point of view. Or we could focus on, paying closer attention to nonverbal cues, becoming more aware of the feeling tone of our interactions.
Right. And I love that, the book encourages us to seek feedback. Like, that can be scary, but it's so valuable to have that, that outside perspective.
Absolutely. Feedback helps us to, identify our blind spots
Hmm.
and to see ourselves more clearly. And it also shows the other person that we genuinely care about understanding them. It's a powerful way to build trust and to strengthen relationships.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's given me a lot to think about, and really, like, a renewed commitment to cultivating my own empathy. But where do we go from here? How do we, like, take these insights and actually integrate them into, our daily lives?
That's the key question, and it's one that we'll explore further in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at specific strategies for actually putting these concepts into action. So stay tuned.
So we've covered so much in this deep dive. We've explored the narcissistic spectrum, those four components of empathy, and we even got to see how those dynamics play out in those real life stories. Now, how do we actually put this knowledge into practice? What are some concrete steps to become more empathetic in our everyday lives?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's all about, application. The book, it really emphasizes that empathy is a skill. And like any skill, it takes practice and the good news is that even small acts of empathy can create this ripple effect, impacting not just our own lives, but the lives of, those around us.
Right. So it's like paying it forward with kindness and understanding. It's not about these big gestures, It's those small everyday interactions where we choose to connect with others on a deeper level.
Right, exactly. And think about it, like when someone shows genuine interest in you, they really listen to what you have to say,
Yeah.
or they offer a kind word. I mean, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel seen and heard. It
Yeah.
makes me, feel valued. It makes me want to be more understanding and compassionate towards others.
Exactly, precisely.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it, right? These seemingly small acts, this can have a huge impact, creating a more, positive and connected social environment. It's about shifting from a mindset of self-interest to a mindset of shared humanity.
It's like we're all threads in this tapestry, and our individual acts of empathy are the stitches that hold it all together. But let's be honest, it's not always easy to be empathetic, especially when we're stressed or tired, or dealing with our own challenges, right? What are some, like, tips for cultivating empathy when it feels, difficult?
That's a really valid point. We all have those moments where empathy just feels like a stretch, and one strategy that the book suggests is to remind yourself of the benefits of empathy,
Mm-hmm.
both for yourself and for others.
Mm-hmm.
Studies have shown that empathy can reduce stress, it can improve our relationships, it can even boost our physical health.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just a nice thing to do; it's actually good for us.
Right. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
We benefit and the people around us benefit.
Exactly.
That's motivating to think about it that way. But what about those times when we're dealing with somebody who's, really difficult, someone who like maybe triggers our own insecurities or frustrations, how do we find empathy for people who kind of push our buttons?
That's where things get really challenging. But it's also where empathy is most needed. And remember, empathy it doesn't mean condoning someone's behavior or letting them walk all over you. It simply means trying to understand their perspective,
Hmm.
even if you disagree with them.
So like separating the person from their actions.
Exactly. Exactly. It's about recognizing that everyone has a story. Everyone is dealing with their own internal struggles. And so instead of judging or labeling them, we can try to see the world through their eyes, try to understand what might have led them to this point. It doesn't excuse their behavior, but it can help us respond with more compassion and less reactivity.
Right. So instead of seeing them as the enemy, we see them as a fellow human being who's struggling. It reminds me of that saying, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle."
That's beautiful, and I think it perfectly captures the essence of empathy. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, and we all need a little kindness and understanding along the way.
Well, this deep dive has really been an eye opener. It's given me a new understanding of myself, my relationships, and the world around me, and most importantly, it's given me a renewed commitment to making empathy, a conscious practice in my life.
Well, it's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you, and remember, you're not alone on this journey. We all have the capacity for empathy, and the more we cultivate it, the more we create a world where understanding and connection prevail.
And for all of you listening, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to embark on your own journey of empathy. It's a skill that can be learned and honed, and the rewards are immeasurable. So keep those empathy muscles flexing, and let's create a world where kindness and understanding triumph. Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.